In my previous life, I was a village girl from Lingnan. My father was the head of the production team. And our family lived in a house made of blue bricks and tiles. Life was pretty prosperous. When I was 15, a group of young intellectuals came to the countryside, among them a man named Julian. He was fair-skinned, refined, and elegant, and I immediately took a liking to him. When the young intellectuals were assigned housing, I begged my father to put Julian in the firewood room at our house, thinking that being close to him would give me an advantage. The other boys my age in the village had little education, and their speech was clumsy and awkward, so I naturally didn't take a liking to them. But now, here was a man who obviously had been to school. I certainly couldn't let him slip away. So, when Julian arrived, I would always sneak in through the back door, asking my father to give him some preferential treatment, less field work, more time to study. Later, when the county announced the restoration of the college entrance exams, I even begged my father to pull some strings and get him study materials from the county, helping him pass the exams and get into university. Of course, the condition was that he had to marry me before the exams, to ensure a smooth path to college. Julian agreed, but once the results came out, and I found out he had been admitted to a university in Shanghai, he left without a word, disappearing into the city. At first, I wrote him several letters, but never received a reply. I went to the address he had left in Shanghai, only to find a shop there, and no sign of Julian. I refused to give up, so I waited for 3 days at the entrance of the university he attended. Finally, heading fulfilledly, on a snowy morning, I saw him appear. He was holding a thermos of hot soy milk, carefully handing it to a female classmate. They were close, sipping from the same cup, and I could hardly bear to watch. Seeing this, I decided not to bother him anymore and planned to return to my hometown in Lingnan, pretending he had never existed. But, after catching a cold, I collapsed in the snow. When I woke up, I was back 2 years ago, at the time when the young intellectuals first came to the village. When I regained consciousness, my heart was like dead ashes. I had no interest in anything. After turning 15, my parents constantly urged me to find someone to marry from the village. But I didn't like any of the boys around my age. Even without Julian, I knew I wouldn't want to marry any of them. This time, the group of young intellectuals wasn't very large. Aside from Julian and a few other boys from Shanghai, there were only 2 girls from the local high school. I no longer had any interest in Julian, and so I didn't care where they were staying. My father took them out to work twice a day, every morning at 5 o'clock. They'd go to harvest rice until noon. Then in the afternoon, they'd harvest sweet potatoes and yams, returning only at 8 in the evening. After several rounds of hard work, the once handsome young intellectuals were old and worn down, looking no different from the village boys. Our family wasn't large. My brother and sister were already married, and with enough labor points, I had been pampered and had even attended school. Reaching junior high, I was somewhat educated, if not highly cultured. This was why I hoped to find someone with similar ideals, someone I wouldn't regret marrying after all those years of education. After about half a month of hard labor, the young intellectuals started to adjust and blend in with the village life. I heard one of the girls had begun to show interest in the village chief's young sons. This was understandable. The village chief had 3 sons, and whoever she paired up with would mean that someone would help her with tasks in the future. It would make her life much easier. Their family mainly relied on the father and older brother for the physical labor, while she and her sister-in-law only handled the household chores. I thought this was fine. In any environment, a person must ensure their own well-being. If she had to use a little trickery, it was understandable. As long as she didn't harm anyone to benefit herself, I might even help her. The village chief's family lived next door to us in a large two-entry brick house with 4 or 5 rooms. It looked quite prosperous. If it hadn't been for the fact that I wasn't interested in any of the 3 sons, perhaps our families would have already been engaged. One day, that girl who was on leave for her period came over to Dorothy's house. She was said to be in excruciating pain, but the village allowed her to take the afternoon off. I had nothing to do at home, so I wandered around the yard with my hands behind my back. Dorothy from next door saw me and called me over to eat some edamame. She had always been kind to me, and her family had a long-standing relationship with my parents, so I couldn't refuse. I took some peanuts that my family had harvested recently, fried them, and brought them over to the village chief, Emil, as a snack to go with the liquor. After chatting for a bit, Dorothy asked about my marriage. "Haven't your parents started asking about it yet?" What could I say to that? If I said they had asked, she'd probably want to know which family it was. And if I said no, she'd surely start trying to introduce me to Rattri's sons or some of her nephews. So, I chose to smile awkwardly. "You child. Are you still shy?" Just then, the girl who had been on leave for her period arrived. She had come to return some needles and thread she had borrowed from Dorothy. She was surprised to see me there. I could tell she had come over to gain favor with Dorothy, so I quickly excused myself, saying I had to go back to my family's cooking, and rushed out. Before leaving, I gave her a supportive glance, which made her stop in her tracks for a moment. After that, although life didn't change much, my mood improved significantly. I spent my days at home playing with the cat and dog, slowly forgetting about all those things. However, Dorothy seemed to have found out from somewhere that my parents hadn't arranged a marriage for me yet. She began inviting me over for meals every few days or sending her sec and son over to help with the work in our fields. My father was pleased. Of course. Her second son, Gareth, was tall and strong, with an immense amount of strength. A few acres of rice that would take 2 or 3 days for someone else to harvest, he could finish in a day. With someone like that as a son-in-law, he'd never have to go out to work again. The problem was, I wasn't interested in his daughter. He had mentioned it several times at home, asking me what I didn't like about him. After thinking about it, I realized that if I said I didn't like him, he'd probably argue that no one knows what they like before marriage, that's only after marrying that people learn to like each other. Finally, cutting for Felbleo, I slapped my head and said that I wanted to marry someone handsome, with money and power. When my father heard this, he didn't think I was daydreaming. He praised me for having ambition, but he also said that there were no such people in the village. He had heard that 2 of the young intellectuals came from families that owned factories, so they were considered wealthy, but their looks were rather average. He thought I wouldn't be interested in them. As for Julian, he was a handsome man, but he didn't know if his family had money or not. In the following days, my father quietly began to inquire about Julian. At first, I didn't know, but one day, he actually brought Julian home. I had just finished washing my hair and was wearing a headscarf when I walked out, and I was startled to see Julian standing in the yard. Perhaps it was because I was wearing a loose, casual nightgown that day, which was a bit inappropriate. Julian looked at me and was momentarily stunned, his eyes wandering for a long while before he finally turned away to avoid looking directly at me. I shot him a sharp glare and hurried back into the house to hide. I thought my dad had called him over for something, and figured I'd talk to him later about not bringing just anyone home. But when it came time for lunch, my dad dragged him right to the table and officially introduced him to the family. I was upset and deliberately avoided looking at my dad. When he asked me to greet the guest, I turned my back to him, making my dad awkward. This way, I figured, he'd get the message and wouldn't think of him as anything more than a visitor. Later that evening, my mom came to find me. She started by scolding me, saying I shouldn't have been rude in front of guests. I didn't bother responding much, just nodded along, letting her words pass through one ear and out the other. Then she moved on to what she considered the main topic, Julian. She started praising him. I was dumbfounded. What kind of plot twist was this? "Listen, darling," my mom began. "I've heard about Julian. Your dad did some digging, and his parents are both teachers at a university up north, with some well-connected relatives in the military. If it weren't for those political messes back in the day, his family could have been in the government." Seeing my disinterest, my mom pressed on. "And after Julian went back, I asked your brother to find out what he thought. This got my attention. In my past life, our family was desperate to find someone to marry me off. How would he react now?" My mom flashed a mysterious smile when she saw I was curious. He didn't say much. But at lunch, I noticed Julian glanced at you 4 or 5 times. She went on, clearly delighted. Our daughter's so pretty. Look at that young man. One glance. And he's already smitten. Just like me. Don't you think? I could only laugh awkwardly. What was Julian up to? Was he really after something else? Looking at the timeline. Next September they'd receive news that the college entrance exams would be reinstated. All the educated youth from their village would return to the city to take the exam. No one would stay behind. Julian surely couldn't plan to stay in the countryside for the rest of his life. But I wasn't in a position to do anything about it for now. I'd just wait and see what he was really after. From that day on, I kept running into him while out picking vegetables. A couple of times. I thought it was a coincidence. But after a few more days, I bumped into him again. I had just picked a basket of cabbage from the field and was washing them in the creek. It was getting close to noon, and many of the workers were wrapping up for the day. This creek was located in a dip in the land, and most of the workers washed up by the nearby main canal, so no one usually came to this side. As I walked back with my basket, I noticed Julian leaning casually against a tree. He was wearing the same white shirt he had worn before coming to the countryside. His features were striking: broad eyebrows, big eyes, and a tall frame. I froze for a moment, and a hazy memory came to me of how I had once liked him. Seeing that I wasn't walking ahead, he actually came over. I quickly lowered my head to avoid him, turned to the side, and tried to walk past him. Just as we brushed past each other, Julian suddenly asked, "Why are you avoiding me? Don't you like me?" I was taken aback by his question. I stared at him, not understanding, thinking he had misunderstood. He moved to block my way. "My dad told me," Julian continued. "I know what you want. When I get into university next year, I'll take you back to Shanghai." My heart skipped a beat. What had my dad said to him? I wasn't even sure what I wanted. So how could he know? In my past life, when I was forced to marry him, he had been so unwilling that he spent the entire wedding night in the next room reading. And now, what was this? I was confused. But at the same time, a little irritated. He hadn't liked me before. So why did it seem like he was suddenly so into me? "What do you like about me?" I asked, my voice sharp. Julian's face flushed with a tinge of red, and after a brief pause, he looked at me seriously and said, Your eyes. They're beautiful. So full of passion." I was taken aback. My eyes had never been lacking in intensity in my past life. I practically glued them to him 20 and it was that overwhelming passion that had made him avoid me. Suddenly, a thought crossed my mind, and I couldn't help but smile. I understood now. He didn't like someone who threw themselves at him. He liked the chase. The distance. How pretentious. With this realization, I naturally began to view him from a more dominant perspective. I glanced at him, not intending to make things easy for him. "You're about to go to university. And I'm not a good match for you. I'll talk to my dad about this. And you don't need to force yourself." I gave him a half smile and looked at him once more before walking away quickly. After that, Julian still appeared occasionally in my line of sight. But when my dad came home that day and I made a scene, he didn't seem so eager to bring him back anymore. While he thought Julian might be a suitable son-in-law, he actually preferred Gareth from next door. With all these factors at play, my dad became much less enthusiastic about Julian. As for Julian, I couldn't claim to know him very well. But during this time, he had definitely been quiet. A few days later, my dad mentioned that Julian had been transferred to teach in the town. I wasn't particularly bothered. It was probably for the best. In my past life, there were many things left unresolved, but this time, at least he had tasted the bitterness of unrequited love. That was enough. We were even now. A few months later, life had returned to its calm pace, and I almost forgot about Julian. Then one day, Dorothy from next door suddenly told my mom that her nephew was coming to the village and urged her to take me to meet him. I'd never met this nephew of hers, but I assumed he was probably just like the other men from our village. I wasn't particularly interested, but my mom insisted. On the day he was supposed to arrive, she dragged me to Dorothy's house. As soon as we entered, I saw two unfamiliar men standing in the room. The shorter one was tanned but stood tall, exuding a certain energy. The other one, though, was sideways, and I couldn't quite make out his face. But his whole demeanor was different from the others in the room. It felt like he didn't belong here. I smiled to myself, thinking this couldn't be Dorothy's nephew. Sure enough, Dorothy hurried over to greet me and pulled me towards the shorter man. "Owen, come over. This is my nephew from my mother's side. His name is Percival." When I heard his aunt introduce him, the man named Percival blushed and mumbled a "hello," but didn't lift his head to look at me. I wasn't particularly concerned about him, so I smiled and looked past him at the other man. "What about him?" "I like him." The moment the words left my mouth, the entire room fell silent. Even the person I had pointed at turned around, looking at me in surprise. Dorothy quickly stepped in to smooth things over. "Oh, I believed you. Sorry about that, sir," she said, then hurriedly pulled me aside. "Owen, you can't do this. He's Percival's superior. You know," I responded with an indifferent "oh," and backed away, retreating behind my mother. My mother shot Dorothy a brief, awkward glance before quickly making up an excuse and pulling me back home. Once we were back, my mother scolded me severely. She explained that Percival's superior was a general in their brigade, just passing through on his way to visit his family in the county. She had allowed Percival to accompany him as a favor. If I had made a scene like that, it might have upset him, and Percival could face consequences. At that, I felt guilty for having acted rashly, and a wave of shame washed over me as I thought of Percival. Hearing that the general and Percival would be leaving the day after tomorrow, I quickly figured out when Dorothy would be out. I sneaked over to their house, intending to apologize to Percival. I knew they only had two guest rooms, one of which must have been reserved for the general. The other, most likely, belonged to Percival. I gently knocked on the door and called out in a low voice. "Percival? Percival? Are you there? I need to speak with you." After waiting for a long while with no response, I decided to open the door, planning to leave my apology letter on the table and quietly leave. I had hoped to explain that it was all my fault, that I hadn't thought things through and had spoken out of turn, urging him to tell the general not to mind. But just as I pushed the door open, I was startled to see a man stepping out of the room wearing only his underwear. I barely caught a glimpse of him before I hurriedly threw the letter down, yanked the door shut, and fled as fast as I could. My heart was pounding. I couldn't help but recall his firm body, his tall frame, and I felt my face flush with heat. The curiosity in my heart grew, and that night, I secretly climbed up the wall to see who the man was. If it turned out to be Percival, I thought, it might still work out. He'd read my letter, and if he didn't mind, maybe we could still get to know each other. Ah, how visual we humans are. I almost despised myself for thinking this way. As I reached the top of the wall, the full moon made it easy to see clearly. I heard movement from the guest room below and quickly focused my attention. The door opened, and sure enough, the man I had seen earlier stepped out. I leaned forward, trying to get a better look at him. But as I did, my foot slipped, and I fell head first. I braced myself for a hard fall, but midway, I felt a strong arm grab me. Before I knew it, I was being lifted into the air in a princess carry, and we landed smoothly on the ground. I looked up at my savior, in shock, only to freeze in disbelief. It was him, the general, Percival's superior. I quickly lowered my head, my face burning with embarrassment. I struggled for a moment, and he quickly let go of me. Although I felt awkward, I remembered the trouble I might have caused for Percival and quickly shifted back to the matter at hand, apologizing sincerely. "I'm sorry. I was wrong that day. Please don't take it to heart." I cautiously raised my head, watching for his reaction. I heard a soft, melodic laugh that sent a shiver through my body. "It's nothing. You're quite the interesting little lady." My face flushed even more. Well, I should go now. I turned to leave, only to find myself face to face with a wall about a foot and a half taller than me. I had no choice but to turn back, feeling slightly embarrassed as I looked at the general. He let out a soft laugh, then gently wrapped his arm around my waist. With a swift motion, he jumped and landed us both on top of the wall. My heart raced wildly, and I couldn't help but feel drawn to him. Maybe this was the type of man I liked. I couldn't stop myself from looking up at him, trying to find some small possibility of a future together. But then, reality hit. There was no way a man like him, a military officer, would ever fall for a village girl like me. My heart sank. But strangely, a strange courage began to rise in me. If we could never be together, then what was there to hesitate about? We only live once. With that thought, I took advantage of his grip on me, standing on my tiptoes to close the distance, and kissed him on the lips. As soon as I pulled back, I quickly descended the ladder and snuck back to my house. Lying in bed that night, I couldn't help but applaud my own boldness. This opportunity wouldn't come again, and though it was a bit reckless, I didn't regret it. I hid under the covers, feeling giddy for a while, until I heard voices coming from my mother's room. Oh, they were still talking about my marriage. What's the rush? I was only 15, still at the age to study. Tomorrow, I'd tell my dad I wanted to go to school and forget about this whole marriage thing. The next day, I didn't dare ask about Percival and his superior, acting as if nothing had happened. Naturally, my parents had no clue. When I told them I wanted to go to school, they thought it over and agreed. The farming team was already showing signs of exhaustion, and even the town leaders were looking into alternative paths. If their daughter was truly cut out for studying, an extra option would be good for the family. So, my education was settled. My dad went to the town to consult with my uncle and successfully enrolled me in the town's middle school. By the third day, I was cycling to school early each morning on the bike my father had bought for me 2 years ago. Having something to do helped me forget about Percival's superior. As winter approached, one morning, just as I was about to head out, I looked up and saw him, Percival's superior, coming out of his door. My eyes went wide, both shocked and embarrassed. Didn't Dorothy say they were leaving after 3 days? How come they were still here? Nearly half a month later? Recalling what had happened, my face flushed again. I could only give him an awkward smile and pretend as if nothing had happened. Getting on my bike to leave, just as I was about to pedal away, he walked up to me, nudging my front wheel with the tip of his shoe. My heart skipped a beat. Was he going to confront me about what happened? He chuckled softly, his voice cool. Where are you going? I didn't dare look him in the eye, only muttering, I'm going to school in the town. He gave a short, oh, and released my wheel. Seizing the opportunity, I quickly pedaled off. As I rode, I made a mental note, I couldn't deal with a man like him again. I wouldn't dare. Fortunately, heading southly, I didn't run into him again over the next few mornings. Otherwise, I might not have been able to face school at all. But then, let out a low sigh. Something strange happened. The teacher who usually taught our class was replaced by Julian. Seeing him made me uncomfortable, and my concentration during class dropped. After class one day, I went outside to ride my bike as usual. Just as I was about to mount it, Julian walked over. Eloan. He took hold of my bike's handlebars, and I had no choice but to stop. Speak. What can I do for you? Hearing the impatience in my tone, Julian seemed a bit embarrassed. I just wanted to let you know that I've written to my family. If you agree, my parents will send someone over to propose. I couldn't help but laugh. I considered myself to be quite considerate, and I had already clearly rejected his confession. Why was he so stubborn? I shook my head. Julian, I think I've told you already we're not suited for each other. Julian seemed a bit disappointed but still followed me. I ignored him. He didn't have a house in our village, and if he came back with me, he'd have to stay in a shack. The thought made me smile. Let him follow if he liked. As winter set in, the days grew shorter, and I bundled up more. One evening, while riding my bike past the old commune warehouse, a small stone suddenly got stuck in my tire. I lost my balance and fell sideways. Julian quickly ran over to help. I had sprained my ankle and couldn't get up right away. So I looked at him and extended my hand. To my surprise, Julian, in his usual misguided way, grabbed my hand and without thinking, reached for my waist to help me up. I glared at him. But he thought I was being playful and grinned. Seriously? What do you think you're doing? Suddenly, a somewhat familiar voice came from behind. I quickly pushed Julian away and steadied myself by grabbing the wall. Julian turned around and saw a bicycle parked a few steps away, its light shining brightly. When the person approached, I could finally make out that it was Percival's superior. Before I knew what to say, Julian spoke in surprise. Uncle 16? The man approached and realized we were familiar with each other. I could feel his gaze briefly scan me before he turned to speak with Julian. From their conversation, I learned that the man was a distant relative of Julian's. And his name was 16 Uncle, because he was ranked 16th in their family. He had gone into the military years ago and hadn't been back home for a long time. After a brief chat, both of them turned their attention to me. My ankle was sprained, and there was no way I could hop back home. I wasn't about to flirt with this man, so I looked at Julian for help. Julian caught my hint and smiled. Uncle 16. Eloane sprained her ankle. And oh, that's fine. I live just across from her house. I'll take her home. The man interrupted, offering to help. Before I could catch my breath, he swiftly grabbed my bike and strapped it onto his own. Noticing I still hadn't gotten on, he gave me a sly smile. What's wrong? Should I carry you up? My face flushed, and without thinking of the pain in my ankle, I quickly climbed onto the back of his bike. I didn't dare wrap my arms around his waist. I just tightly gripped the back of the seat, hoping we would get home soon. Hold on tight. The road is narrow ahead. The road was full of haystacks from the autumn harvest, scattered all over, making it difficult to navigate. I muttered a soft reply and gripped tighter. After a while, the man up front clicked his tongue and tilted his head slightly. What happened to all that courage you had before? I didn't dare speak. I had thought he would leave the next day, and now I was stuck in this awkward situation. I only smiled awkwardly, unable to find anything to say. What's up with Julian? He suddenly asked, now sounding unusually chatty. I could answer that. Oh. He's substituting at our school. He insisted on coming back with me today. At this, the man suddenly put his foot down on the ground and stopped the bike, the wheels turning halfway before coming to a halt. Looks like you're pretty proud of yourself? He swung his leg off the bike and, after setting the kickstand, walked over to me. I had no reason to be proud. It was Julian who was being foolish. Before I could respond, he suddenly grabbed my head and kissed my lips. Has he ever kissed you like that? I was completely stunned and instinctively shook my head. Seeing this, he shrugged infuriately. Forget it. We're even now. Let's go. I didn't understand his intentions, but I vaguely sensed that he didn't have any real feelings for me. It seemed like he was just driven by a sense of competition. Once he kissed me, he probably realized that he didn't actually like me after all. I sat behind him, silently shedding a few tears. My heart was finally dead to him. After that, until the news about the college entrance exams being reinstated came, I never saw that man again. Of course, at school, I completely distanced myself from Julian and focused on my studies for the next several months. I even registered to take the exams. Maybe it was only after I had given up that I could truly focus on my studies. On the day of the exam, it felt surprisingly easy. After finishing, I didn't really care how I did whatever the result. I'd return to the village to be with my parents. With a high school diploma, I could always teach at the local primary school, which wasn't too bad. 2 months later, I was at home feeding the chickens and ducks when I suddenly heard a commotion outside. Growing closer, I quickly went to check. When I reached the door, I saw one of my school teachers approaching, holding a red envelope, walking briskly toward me. His eyes were wide with excitement, and as soon as he saw me, he grabbed my hand. Eloane, congratulations. You've made it. I was stunned, still trying to process what was happening. My mom was quicker to react. snatching the envelope from him and pulling out the acceptance letter. It said National Zhongshan University at the top, and I had been accepted into the foreign language department. I felt like I had hit the jackpot. Though my mom certainly didn't see it that way. She and my dad invited all the relatives over for a big celebration. On the day of the party, they practically wanted to plaster my acceptance letter on the front door for everyone to see. I was a bit helpless but understood their excitement. On the day I left for school, my dad personally borrowed a pickup truck from my uncle and drove me to the train station. Because the college entrance exams had just resumed, the students in my year were of all ages. For example, in our foreign language department, the oldest was nearly 30, and the youngest was probably around my age, 16 or 17. Foreign language studies had become a new field, and the professors were all very dedicated. The library was full of foreign books available for us to browse. By the time I graduated, almost everyone had learned 2 or 3 languages. I majored in English and also took up Japanese as a minor. After graduation, the school recommended me to work at the newly built airport, marking the start of my new career. On my first day of work, the airport customs were welcoming a group of Air Force personnel returning from overseas missions. I heard that their commanding general, only 29 years old, was still single. The flight attendants were all gossiping, eagerly anticipating the arrival of these high-quality military men. I wasn't particularly interested in that. It had been a long time since I paid attention to such things. Seeing how busy I was in the office, the leadership urged me to take a break and join the excitement. With nothing else to do, I helped my colleagues check the documents of the incoming passengers. Suddenly, a pair of long hands reached out with documents. I reached out to take them, but the person didn't let go. When I looked up, I met a familiar pair of eyes. My heart, which had long been at peace, suddenly stirred with a faint pain. But out of professional habit, I forced a smile and politely said, "Sir, please cooperate with the document check." He chuckled softly and finally released his grip. As I flipped through the documents, I finally saw his name, Silas. After returning the documents, I quickly raised my hand to signal for the next person, and Silas didn't say anything further. I imagined that from now on, the two of us would likely never cross paths again. After seeing Silas today, for some reason, I felt unusually exhausted. I informed the director I was leaving early and headed home to rest. On my way home, I kept thinking about why he had such an effect on me. Truth be told, I had only met him a few times. So why did it matter so much? Perhaps it was his casualness and lack of respect toward me. I knew that, to him, whether it was my clumsy kiss or my later avoidance, it was nothing more than a rural pastime. After tasting it, he grew bored and could easily toss it aside, but for me, it had already become an irrational self-fantasy, followed by self-inflicted heartbreak. Once I thought it through, I felt lighter. I wiped away the tears at the corner of my eyes and finally smiled the first genuine smile in years. "Eloan." Suddenly, heading closer me, a familiar cold voice came from behind me. I turned to find it was Silas. I gave him a small smile and nodded before continuing on my way. But Silas quickly caught up to me, sidestepping to stand right in front of me. "What's this? Have you forgotten me after all these years?" I didn't understand why a man could be so narcissistic, thinking every woman he had encountered should be unable to forget him. But still, I responded politely. "I remember, Silas." I smiled. "How have you been?" Maybe it was my overly nonchalant smile, but for a moment, he seemed taken aback. However, being the seasoned man he was, he quickly composed himself and casually invited me for tea. Of course, I refused. A man like him was only appealing when I was 15 or 16. The next day, I went to work as usual, and upon arriving at my desk, I found another bouquet of flowers. Everyone knew it was from Julian, the man who couldn't win my heart. But since we worked in the same superior unit, security didn't stop him. I casually tore apart the bouquet and distributed it to my female colleagues. After all, flowers weren't cheap in this day and age, and throwing them away would be a waste. At lunchtime, just as I expected, Julian was waiting at the entrance of the cafeteria. I tried to walk past him. But this time, Julian seemed particularly determined. He grabbed my hand and led me up to the stairwell on the second floor. I thought perhaps it was time to end the entanglement that had lasted to lifetimes. So I didn't reject him. Owen, I've never understood what you've been holding back. But Julian's expression was filled with genuine sadness for the first time. Maybe this is my last chance. Please say yes. I looked at him curiously. Over the years, since I was assigned to the airport customs, he had been sending flowers and gifts. His pursuit had become well known in the whole office. It would be a lie to say I wasn't moved. If it weren't for all that had happened in the previous life, marrying him might not have been a bad choice. This time, I felt maybe it was time to give him an answer. Julian then knelt down on one knee, took out a ring he had been preparing for 5 years, and presented it to me. Strangely, tears welled up in my eyes. I turned my head to hide them, only to see Silas standing there, leaning casually against the wall. I didn't know how long he had been watching this scene. The tenderness in my heart, which had just risen, suddenly disappeared. I yanked my hand away, threw a cold glance at Silas, and quickly walked out of the cafeteria. The next day, I heard from my colleagues that Julian had been reassigned and was promoted to a higher position in the province. I couldn't exactly put into words how I felt. I felt a sense of relief, yet at the same time, a strange feeling of guilt. On my way home from work, I walked slowly, not noticing a car following behind me. Startled, I quickened my pace, pushed open the door to my building, and tried to hurry up the stairs to my apartment. Just as I stepped onto the first step, a hand reached out and forcefully pulled me back. In the dizzying whirl of it all, a strong male scent surrounded me, followed by a cool kiss. Without thinking, I slapped him. Unfortunately, heading fulfilledly, I didn't even come close before he caught my wrist. I glared at him, for the first time feeling such intense dislike for him. What do you want? To my surprise, Silas actually smiled. He stepped closer, almost pressed against me, and whispered, I'm going to marry you. Instinctively, I kicked him. You're crazy. I wiped my mouth, glaring at him fiercely as I turned to head upstairs. But he didn't let up. He leaned in closer. What? Do you like men like Julian? His hand reached for my face, but all I could think was disgusting. I glared at him and suddenly felt bored. Maybe it ran in their family. They only longed for what they couldn't have and discarded what came too easily. Since he was so persistent, I might as well give him what he wanted. So, for the first time, I calmly looked him in the eye and said, Fine. Tomorrow, I'll go with you to register our marriage. For the first time, I saw a spark of life in Silas's eyes. He was clearly surprised by my response, but his face showed obvious joy. He kept saying, Good, good, and without hesitation, he pulled me into a passionate kiss. Soon, had on a low sigh. It became insatiable, and he whispered, begging me to take him home. I laughed softly and pushed him away. Wait until tomorrow. Tomorrow, you'll get everything you want. He stared after me, watching as I headed upstairs. He didn't follow. The next day, as promised, I took a leave of absence and stayed home waiting for Silas to pick me up. In the early morning, I looked out the window to see a row of Navy military vehicles parked downstairs. Silas stood at the front with a group of men in naval uniforms, lined up straight. Honestly, heading for so wide sigh. It was quite the sight. I smiled nonchalantly, quickly put on some light makeup, threw on a white dress, and went downstairs. When Silas saw me, he mistook my simple look for knowing there were requirements for a marriage certificate photo. He was delighted and immediately pulled me into his arms, carrying me to the car in full view of everyone. I reciprocated by holding his neck, making the appearance of affection. At the registration office, Silas had surely made arrangements beforehand. After a quick photo, signatures, and a few exchanges, 2 fresh marriage certificates were handed to us. Looking at the 2 smiling faces on the certificate, I couldn't help but feel it was all a bit absurd. Later that night, lying in his bed, I still couldn't shake the feeling that this was all surreal. What are you thinking? Silas's voice was lower now. Warmer. I shook my head. What did it matter whether it felt real or not? Let him have what he wanted. After the divorce, we would go our separate ways. The next morning, Silas even made me meet Porridge himself. I couldn't understand him. Maybe this was how the privileged were so laid back. I waited for him to grow tired of me, so I could bring up the divorce. But by the time our first child was born, he was still the same. I often felt confused, and wasn't all that enthusiastic about Silas. I knew he was aware that I might not love him. Yet, even so, he seemed content. I never dared to trust any man again. One day, I woke from a dream, turned my head, and found Silas hadn't been sleeping. He looked at me and, for the first time, said, "Eloan, I love you." I smiled and replied, "I love you too." After President Heath and jumped to his death due to depression, he left all his money and two villas to me. But I had just returned to the country not long ago. I didn't even know him. We barely exchanged a few words at the company. After his death, I received a cardboard box, and only then did I realize how wrong I had been. Inside were some clothes, a photo album, a teddy bear, and a worn-out notebook. I opened the album. The photos were unmistakably of a younger me, intimately wrapped in Ethan's arms in every single one. His eyes were deep like ink, full of tenderness. On the corner of the album, he had written in strong calligraphy, "Kara, I miss you." Flashes of memories surged back, leaving me breathless. Ethan. Why did I forget you? My head throbbed with pain as my consciousness began to blur. A white light flashed, then darkness swallowed me. When I opened my eyes again, I had returned to 6 months ago, just when I had started working at the company. I looked up, and there Ethan was still alive. At this point, depression hadn't consumed him yet. He stood tall, cool and distant. "Not coming in?" he asked me. His gaze was indifferent and remote. My hands trembled. My heart pounded, and I stiffly walked into the elevator. He spoke again. "What floor?" 18th. I stammered. He seemed to find me odd. After pressing the floor button, he walked to the farthest corner of the elevator. I stared at him blankly. When the elevator reached the 12th floor, the doors opened, and he walked out. "Don't bother." "No chance," a woman beside me said coldly. I looked at her in confusion. Seemed like she worked at the company. She leaned in mysteriously. "Word is, President Heath and has a deeply beloved fiancée. They're already engaged, and very much in love. That plain ring on his right hand?" She gave it to him. Hearing that he loved someone else, a sharp pain stabbed through my heart. My thoughts were a mess. I checked into a nearby hotel, collapsed onto the bed, and tried to sleep, but it was a restless night. My dreams were strange and chaotic, all about Ethan. In them, we met at an orphanage. Later, I was found by my biological parents and forced to leave him. At 18, I became the daughter of the richest man, while he struggled through school working part-time jobs. He recognized me immediately. I fell for him at first sight, but my life wasn't easy. My stepmother made things hard, and my scheming stepsister turned my father against me. When he found out I was in love with Ethan, he forced me to go abroad. The night before I left, I gave myself to Ethan, telling him over and over to wait for me. I slipped a silver ring onto his ring finger. Later, a tragic car accident wiped out all my memories. My father and stepmother lied to me, saying my fiancé had found someone else. I believed them and moved on with someone new. I had no idea how devastated Ethan must have felt seeing me holding another man's hand after waiting 5 years. Nor could I imagine the despair that made him jump from the 30th floor, swallowed by depression. But now I've been reborn. I remember everything. I have to find him and tell him it was all my fault. From now on, we'll be together truly. Just as I was about to look for Ethan, a voice echoed in my mind. "Kara, your rebirth system is now active. You must make Ethan fall in love with you again in this parallel timeline. If you fail, everything you are will be erased." I thought I misheard, and reached for the door. "Please confirm system activation within 10 seconds. After 10 seconds, it will be assumed you decline. The time tunnel will close automatically. 10. 7. I had no time to think. I chose to activate it. A mechanical voice followed. Host. I am your rebirth assistant 1. You will now relive your life. For narrative stability, you may not reveal events to others. If you attempt to do so, your ability to speak will be revoked. So I've been reborn. But I can't tell Ethan the truth? Confused, I returned to Ethan's company building. It was lunchtime. People streamed out of the building. In the crowd, I saw him. Just as I was about to run toward him, I saw a woman nestled in his arms. She had long curly hair, wore a white dress, and Ethan held her carefully. Her face, I had seen it countless times in my nightmares. Cruel, twisted, having fostowed say. Smug. Mocking. She was my stepsister Vivian. My stepmother's daughter. Why? Why is Ethan with her? Why do they look like lovers? I rushed to block his path. Vivian saw me. A flicker of fear passed over her face before she feigned surprise. Kara? What are you doing here? I thought you were abroad. Where's your fiancé? I ignored her, staring only at Ethan. Why are you with her? My accusatory tone made him frown slightly. Because I like her, he said. Hearing it from his mouth, I felt like I couldn't breathe. That's impossible. You clearly loved me. My mouth moved, but no sound came out. Ethan, are you sure you're not mistaken? Don't you know that it was me you loved? One's voice cut in. Host. Warning. You may not reveal events. Attempting to do so will disable your speech. I was on the verge of tears. But Ethan was already losing patience. In his eyes, I was just his beloved's foolish little sister. Vivian took the chance to pull me aside. Lathan, my sister isn't well. That's why Dad sent her abroad for school and treatment. We don't know why she suddenly came back. Then she turned to me. Kara, does Dad know you're back? Come home, he'll be worried. She emphasized, Dad, warning me not to make a scene. Then she linked arms with Ethan and walked away. Back home, my father Magnus was waiting for me. In my last life, I had obeyed, so he greeted me with a smile. This time, however, his face was dark, a storm brewing. When he was younger, Magnus had married into my mother's wealthy family. Bit by bit, he seized control of the family business. Less than a year after my mother died, he brought home his mistress and my stepsister Vivian, who's 1 year older than me. He had been cheating on my mother all along. Looking at him now, I felt nothing but disgust. Magnus stared at me coldly. You left Lucas and came back just to steal your sister's boyfriend? Vivian had clearly told him I'd gone looking for Ethan. And, of course, he took her side. I sneered. You know perfectly well who Ethan really likes. His expression shifted. He studied me as if weighing something. Then his tone softened. So what? Ethan had an accident while hiking. Hit his head, now he's confused. We say he likes Vivian. So that's who he likes. Ethan. Lost his memory? I was utterly shocked. Seeing my stunned face, Magnus smirked smugly. You're my daughter, I won't mistreat you. Just stay with Lucas and live a decent life. Ethan and his family's company will all belong to Vivian. Don't be too greedy. I'm not greedy. But I can't let go of Ethan. So after leaving the Vivian family, I went to Ethan's villa. In my previous life, during a company team building event, someone had once shared the location of his villa. I vaguely remembered it was in the most luxurious area of a wealthy district. Following my memories step by step, I eventually got lost in the garden. The sky was getting dark, and the wind carried a hint of moisture. It was going to rain. I sat hopelessly on the steps by the roadside, watching the raindrops fall one by one. I still remember the night before I went abroad. It was raining like this too. I secretly climbed out the window and left home, running to the small house Ethan had rented. 20-year-old Ethan lit up the moment he saw me. He pulled me into his arms, and we kissed. Steady and gentle as he was, even as he undid the buttons, he still asked, Kara, my Kara, is this okay? I wrapped my arms around his neck, and we became more entangled. The sound of the rain outside masked our gasps and moans. Ethan kissed me again and again. From my fingertips to my ankles. Maybe fate had already written the ending. And that was why all our love exploded on that day. Ethan. What kind of heart did you have back then? Waiting for me to come back? I covered my face, feeling tears blend with the rain as they rolled down my cheeks. A pair of long legs stopped in front of me. I looked up. It was Ethan holding an umbrella. In a smoke-gray tracksuit. He looked handsome and fresh, with raindrops still clinging to the ends of his hair. Just like when he was 20. He looked at me. Come inside. After showering, I saw him sitting on the sofa. The adult Ethan was much more composed and much colder than during school. I remembered how in my last life, my boss used to complain about how stary President Ethan was when he got angry. I laughed at the time, thinking he was just timid. But now, seeing Ethan sitting there so quietly, my legs suddenly went weak. I was scared. Scared he would say something that would hurt. He looked up from his book and scanned me from head to toe. Then he spoke. Did you come here to seduce me? His tone was light, but it cut through me like a knife. I couldn't bear it and took 2 steps back. That small movement made his eyes grow darker. It hit me late. He was angry. Was he mad because I upset the woman he loved? But the person he loved most used to be Mimi. He put the book down and walked over, slowly gripping my chin. Kara. Is it? You look so pitiful when you cry. Vivian was right. You're exactly the kind of woman who plays mind games. I slowly shook my head, and tears fell onto his hand, making him tremble slightly. But the next moment, his fingers tightened, revealing his disgust. You used to bully her, badmouth her, steal her boyfriend. That's all in the past. I can let it go. But now, she's my girlfriend. Stay away from her. I wanted to explain, wanted to tell the truth, but the system muted my voice. I couldn't say a word. Overwhelmed, I struggled to breathe. Everything went black, and I passed out. I dreamed of our childhood, me and Ethan, in an old, shabby orphanage. I ended up there after getting lost. I was scared and cried at night. He heard me and came out, handing me a Kara candy. The wrapper was already blackened, and it had many tear marks. Clearly, someone had tried to open it multiple times but didn't eat it. I looked at the scrawny little boy with teary eyes. He grinned at me, revealing a missing tooth. I laughed through my tears. My fear eased a little. He kept looking after me until my family came to take me back. In high school, I once walked through the stairwell holding books when a figure brushed past me, carrying a light scent of soap. Someone shouted, "A fun!" He turned back, and our eyes met. We could hear the sound of each other's hearts fluttering. But later, I lost him. I saw him step onto the rooftop, his eyes hollow and desperate. He murmured something for a while, then slowly fell backward. Then, I jolted awake, realizing I was still in Ethan's bedroom. The room was pitch black, with a faint smell of smoke in the air. You were dreaming. He must have been standing by the window for a long time. You called my name. The way you cried, it was so sad. So heart-connecting. He walked step by step to the bedside. I don't remember you at all, Kara. But why does it hurt so much to see you cry? Why did my heart ache when you fainted? I couldn't see his face in the darkness, but I could feel his helplessness and confusion. But I couldn't speak. I couldn't utter a single word about our past. I wiped my face. Sure enough, it was wet with tears. Maybe I'll never get his love again. But I still wanted to know if he was okay. Ethan? Are you doing well? He froze. I stubbornly asked again. Ethan, are you happy now? Yeah. Are you eating properly? Yeah. Have you seen a therapist? No. You should. Just treat it like a checkup. I didn't want him to fall into that pit again. There was one last question I hesitated over for a long time, but I asked anyway. Do you really like Vivian now? I knew I shouldn't ask, but I just couldn't let it go. As expected, the air turned cold the moment the words left my mouth. The next second, the lights came on. Afam returned to his cold demeanor, even more disgusted than before. He frowned and distanced himself from me. So that's what you were waiting for? I'll tell you clearly, yes. I love Vivian. I'll love her for the rest of my life. She was my childhood dream. My obsession. My tether. She's my happiness for a lifetime. So Kara, don't waste your time. You really disgust me. With that, he walked out without looking back. Even though the room was warm, I still broke out in cold sweat. In a daze, I heard something ringing. It was my phone. Surprised my baby. Are you asleep yet? Lucas? How could I forget him? I still had an engagement with him. Kara. What's wrong? Lucas sensed something was off. His playful tone faded. There was a long silence on the other end, nearly driving him crazy. And he heard a woman's soft, apologetic voice say, Hadn't Fostel want say. Let's break up. Lucas. I was the one who said it. But as I walked out of Ethan's house, I saw him squatting across the street. A second young master of KL group looked haggard, his head bowed, surrounded by cigarette butts. My nose stung. Lucas truly cherished me. Back then, a man who once played the field had stopped going out after we got engaged. I didn't like crowds. And even though he was bored to the point of tugging his hair, he still sat with me on the sofa reading books. After my car accident, I suffered nerve damage. And my temper got worse. I would snap for no reason. Sometimes, I'd suddenly ignore him. And he'd get so anxious, pacing in front of me until I laughed. Then he'd be both angry and helpless. Kara. Go ahead and mess with me all you want. He really liked me. I should have been happy with him if only I hadn't remembered Ethan. I squatted down and held his hand hanging by his side. He looked at me, eyes filled with despair and helplessness. Why do we have to break up? Please don't leave me. I'm sorry. Baby. It's all my fault. His words came out in a mess. His eyes red with emotion. I took a deep breath, guilt eating away at me. It's not your fault. Lucas. You're a good person. I just remembered something, there's someone waiting for me. I can't let him down. He stared at me in shock. Who is it? I lowered my head. Speechless. Unable to face his pain. Lucas say. I'm not a good person. Not at all. Please forget about me. Someday, you'll meet someone better than me, someone more deserving of your love. More importantly, someone who will love you back. Lucas seemed to realize that my decision was firm. After a long silence, he sighed. All right. Kara. We'll break up. But don't regret this. I broke off the engagement with Lucas. Magnus was furious and tried to throw me out, only to be stopped by my stepmother. After showering, I turned on my phone and saw a photo Vivian had posted. On her slender ring finger sat a dime and as big as a pigeon egg, tightly held by someone's hand. The caption read, Growing old with you. Before I could react, the door suddenly burst open. Vivian stormed in arrogantly. Kara. Saw my post? How does it feel to be dumped? She had rushed back, desperate to gloat, but instead of the reaction she expected, I gave her a mocking smile. Vivian let out a low sigh. You're pathetic. Stealing someone else's love like a thief. You and your mother only fit to do shady things behind people's backs. You. Her face twisted in fury. She quickly regained her composure and pulled out her phone, dialing a number. The call had just connected, but I instantly recognized the voice. It was Ethan. What's wrong? Kara? Nothing. Ethan G-E-G-E. I just missed you. She replied sweetly. Ethan laughed softly on the other end, his tone gentle and doting. Then let's meet at the office tomorrow. We can have lunch together. Vivian hung up the phone shyly, only to notice the strange look on my face. What are you looking at me like that for? She snapped. He called you Kara? Vivian realized something was off and shut her mouth. She only knew that Ethan and I dated in high school. She didn't know about our childhood or what happened after. Naturally, she didn't understand what the name Kara really meant. The next day, after the Vivian family all left, I contacted one of my grandfather's old friends. After being kicked out of the company by my father, these old friends had scattered and most were living poorly. I asked them a lot about Magnus and my mother's past and discovered many suspicious things. On the way back, a car suddenly sped toward me uncontrollably. The driver wore a mask, only exposing a pair of vicious eyes. The car was moving too fast, I had no time to dodge. The next second, Lucas appeared out of nowhere and pulled me out of harm's way. He urgently asked if I was okay. But my mind was stuck on those eyes, sinister. Like a wolf's. I'd seen them somewhere before. When I returned home, I found my luggage thrown out. Magnus had found out I went to see my grandfather's friends. Enraged and humiliated, he kicked me out. I dragged my suitcase along the road, not knowing where to go. As I stared blankly at the passersby, Lucas appeared in front of me. He looked worse than I did, disheveled and exhausted. I really don't know what to do with you. He drove me to a villa, unlocked the door, and let me in. Stay here. Everything you need is inside. He handed me the key and left without giving me a chance to refuse. After a few days of rest, I went back to Ethan's company building. I had to stop him from getting engaged. Even if he hated me, even if he cursed me, couldn't let them end up together. But I didn't have an access card and couldn't reach his floor. As I stood there anxiously, a man in glasses walked up to me. "Miss Vivian? President Ethan is waiting for you." He brought me to the 12th floor. Ethan stood by the window, looking down. The sound of the assistant closing the door caught his attention. He turned and looked at me. In that moment, time and space collapsed. Images from past and present overlapped. At the orphanage, he handed me the candy he had treasured for so long. At school, he turned when he heard his name and our eyes met. In his tiny apartment, as we lay together, he looked at me with deep love and kept saying, "I love you. Ethan, Ethan. I'm back. Please. Don't push me away." Ethan's past perspective. Just one glance, I saw her in front of the elevator. After 5 years, she was still so graceful and beautiful. I stood hidden in the elevator corner and overheard her talking on the phone. Her voice was soft and sweet. The person on the other end seemed to be her boyfriend, teasing her until she smiled. She used to smile at me like that, calling me Ethan Jige. I pressed the elevator button and looked at her. "Aren't you coming in?" I was hopeful, my voice even trembled. She glanced at me and stepped in. "What floor?" I asked again. "Kara, please remember me. Please. I'm begging you, remember me." She hesitated a moment. 10. 18. She didn't remember me. My legs felt weak as I returned to the office. The psychologist called. "Ethan, hadn't fulfilled my sigh. We've received your test results. You're suffering from severe depression. You should bring a family member and come in." Family? I have none. At age 3, my mother left me at the orphanage door. She had found a new man and abandoned me. The kids there hated me. They thought I was weird, always quiet, so they ganged up on me and bullied me. At 6, I met Kara for the first time. She looked like a little lost princess, nervous and afraid. She reminded me of how I felt when I first arrived. I gave her the only candy I had, watching her eat it like a little squirrel. That moment filled me with a strange sense of happiness. But soon after, she was taken away by her family. Later, we met again, fell in love, and were torn apart. Her family was too wealthy, my sincerity seemed worthless in comparison. I waited and waited, finally graduated from college. In the business world, I did whatever it took to climb higher. All because I believed my Kara was still waiting for me to become strong enough to find her again. But she came back. But she forgot about me. I looked like a stalker, secretly watching her life without me. She seemed so happy, skipping around, jumping into that man's arms, pouting and acting cute. I had seen that man before, Lucas, the second son of the Lucas family. A textbook playboy. But he treated her incredibly well. He held her tightly in his arms, lips brushing her cheek with gentle kisses. It was the kind of scene I had dreamed of having with her. That's when I finally realized I had lost her. Forever. It was like the last bit of light in my life had gone out, plunging me into endless darkness. Grief tore through my heart in waves. Memories kept playing over and over like a movie. I found myself dreaming frequently, getting lost in the past. In those dreams, she was still with me, calling me Ethan Ge. Under me, crying as she whispered she loved me. When depression completely consumed me, I chose to end my life. Before I left, I left all my assets to her. And returned all our memories to her. Kara. Oh Kara. If there is another life, I swear I'll forget you. Because waiting for you hurts too much. Sunlight spilled across Ethan's sculpted profile, casting an eerie beauty over his face. I stood there in a daze, watching him slowly sit down on the couch and pour himself a drink. Kara. So we were schoolmates once. Then you went abroad and only recently came back. Your father cheated. So Vivian is your half-sister. You were engaged to the second son of the Lucas family, but you recently broke it off. I also heard that you tried to secretly contact your grandfather's old allies these past few days. And were kicked out by your father. Now you're basically homeless. He smiled. Pretty rough. Huh? What did he mean by that? Didn't he like Vivian? And why did his tone sound so unfriendly toward the Vivian family? Maybe my expression was too obvious. He gave a faint, apologetic smile. Sorry. I thought you were one of us. So I didn't bother hiding it. Magnus once humiliated me. Utterly destroyed my dignity. He probably thinks I forgot. Now he's trying to marry his daughter to me. Ethan tugged on the hem of his shirt and slowly walked toward me. I know what Magnus did to your mother. I know you want revenge. So instead of choosing Lucas, why not choose me? He didn't know that I had come back for him in the first place. Now he looked like a sly fox, offering me a deal. What do you want me to do? I asked, willingly taking the bait. Honestly, having fulfilled my obsession, I was willing to give him whatever he wanted. He grabbed my wrist and pulled me into his arms. The faint scent of sandalwood filled my nose as his deep voice murmured in my ear. Kara. Be my woman. Let's bring Magnus down together. A wicked smile curved Ethan's lips. And the next second, he kissed me. I tilted my head obediently. That made him pause for a moment. Then he kissed me even deeper, pulling me toward the bedroom attached to the office. It was a chaotic blur for a long while before he finally left to attend a meeting. I lay on the bed, feeling something wasn't right. When I lifted the blanket, I saw a stark red stain on the pristine white sheets. Why? Why was it like this? My mind went blank. I couldn't make sense of anything. Night had already fallen by the time Ethan returned from his meeting. I was still in the same position. He seemed genuinely pleased. Kara, what are you spacing out for? I looked at him. Ethan, have you ever slept with anyone else before? His face instantly darkened. You know I don't like being questioned. Don't get jealous over nothing. But before, you used to call me Kara like that too. My words made him even angrier. He stood up, towering over me. I told you not to keep trying to steal from your sister. All you need to think about is how to keep me happy. I'll take care of the rest. And stop provoking your sister. Got it? I stumbled home, still in a daze. Everything felt different from my previous life. In my past life, Ethan and I had already been together for a long time. And he didn't even know my sister. But now, his instinctive protection and preference for her, he couldn't hide it. I called for the rebirth system assistant. It took a long time before it finally appeared. I told it my doubts. It stayed silent for a while before finally responding. Host. The rebirth system gives you a second chance in a parallel timeline. In this process, past and future events are no longer fixed. Ethan's past has already changed due to your presence. His future now depends on how you affect him. Then it told me what had happened in this timeline. Ethan came from the orphanage. Same as before. But in high school, he didn't meet me. He met Vivian, arrogant and aggressive Vivian. The spoiled heiress left a deep mark on his heart. They started secretly dating, developing mutual feelings. But Vivian was volatile, always throwing tantrums. Ethan humbled himself repeatedly to coax her. After the college entrance exams, Vivian got tired of him and broke things off. Ethan begged, but she never looked back. She even had her father send men to publicly humiliate him. That incident planted a deep hatred in Ethan's heart. So later, when he became successful, the first thing he did was go back to her. On the surface, it looked like rekindled love. In truth, he wanted revenge, wanted to devour the Vivian family, pay them back for the humiliation. And me, hadn't fulfilled my obsession. Kara. I was nothing more than a pawn in his revenge. The assistant saw my hesitation and asked, "Host, do you still want to continue?" I nodded without hesitation. I owed Ethan too much in our past life. Even if I could only spend a moment longer with him here, that was enough. I moved into Ethan's house. When he came home from work, I was just carrying out the soup I had made. "You're back. I made all your favorite dishes, come eat." He froze for a moment, then put down his briefcase and sat at the table. "You made all this?" "Cold-dressed bamboo shoots, sweet and sour ribs, tofu meatball soup, all the dishes Ethan used to love." He picked up his chopsticks and began eating. His manners refined and gentle. "We used to dream about a future like this, peaceful and serene." He once said he knew I hated the sticky feeling of oil on my hands from washing dishes. So he'd wash while I cooked. Then we'd watch movies together, talk about life, maybe even raise a dog in Alaskan, take walks with it after dinner. My heart softened at the thought. Through the rising steam, I looked at him. Ethan, and locally, can we get a dog?" He frowned. "I don't like dogs. They shed too much. Too hard to manage." "Really?" He used to love animals the most. Back in high school, we even adopted a stray kitten together. Had that changed too? I gave a bitter smile. "All right. No dog then. Is the food good?" He picked at it for a bit, then nodded perfunctorily. "I'm done. I'll go to the study." After washing the dishes, I went to find him, only to see him holding a photo of Vivian. Lost in thought. When he saw me, he instinctively shoved it into the drawer. "All done? Are you tired?" I shook my head. He leaned over and held me in his arms. He began to gently kiss the side of my neck, his breathing growing heavier. A flush spread across my fair skin, and his pupils contracted as he suddenly bit down. Something seemed to trickle down, which he carefully licked clean. And he kissed my lips, the metallic taste spreading through my mouth with his saliva. He scooped me up and carried me into the bathroom. After a night of passion, we finally drifted off to sleep as dawn broke. When I woke up, I saw the message he had sent. He said he would get engaged to Vivian in 5 days. And at the engagement party, he would announce that he was with me. Vivian had longed for this moment, believing she would finally marry her beloved. Little did she know, he intended to ruin her. If the opposite of love is hate, could the opposite of hate also be love? Ethan's plan to publicly humiliate Vivian, was it truly out of hatred? Soon, Helen let out a low sigh. The day of the engagement party arrived. All of Vivian's family and friends were present. Vivian looked like a princess, breathtakingly beautiful. Ethan stood beside her, but the smile on his face didn't reach his eyes. I sat at a corner table, waiting for the drama to unfold. Lucas appeared beside me at some point. He knelt before me, sorrowful. "Kara, come with me, please." Takingly beautiful. Ethan stood beside her, but the smile on his face didn't reach his eyes. I sat at a corner table, waiting for the drama to unfold. Lucas appeared beside me at some point. He knelt before me, sorrowful. "Kara, come with me, please." I stubbornly shook my head. "I'm sorry. Lucas. I'm sorry. I can't let go of Ethan." Lucas was utterly devastated. He couldn't understand why things had turned out this way. "Kara, we've been together for 3 years. 3 years. Why did you suddenly break up with me? Why are you with Ethan? You know he's your sister's boyfriend. What are you trying to do? Let me love you. Okay? Kara, let me love you. I promise I'll treat you so well." He pleaded bitterly, and my eyes welled up with tears. "Lucas, hadn't fulfilled my obsession. Forget me. Don't waste your tears on someone unworthy. Please. The fun and I are destined to be entangled. Go. Don't worry about me anymore." He wanted to leave me alone, but he couldn't control himself. I, however, no longer looked at him, focusing instead on the stage. The engagement ceremony began. Amidst a sea of pink roses, Vivian slowly walked toward Ethan. Her eyes were filled with tenderness as she approached the impending abyss. Just as the host congratulated the two families, Ethan suddenly spoke. His words caused Vivian and her family to change expressions instantly. "I'm glad everyone is here today. But the person I'm getting engaged to is Kara. He pointed to the corner. And everyone turned to look at me. A dark figure slipped out of the hall unnoticed. I no longer looked at Lucas's pleading eyes. I gently pried his fingers off my hand, lifted my skirt, and walked toward Ethan. As soon as I reached him, he tightly held my hand. Vivian was in disbelief. Ethan, what did you say? She looked tearfully at the man she once loved, now cold and indifferent. I said, the person I want to marry is Kara. Vivian, you're just the daughter of a mistress. What makes you think I would marry you? Ethan's words were heartless, but his grip on my hand tightened. Your father once trampled on my dignity, calling me a maggot in the mud, unworthy of your family. Now that your family's business is on the brink of collapse, you want to marry me? Do you think you're worthy? Magnus and his wife were furious and tried to rush forward, but Ethan's bodyguards held them back. Ethan? We've treated you well. Even if we wronged you in the past, that was our fault. It has nothing to do with Vivian. Magnus's pained expression made me momentarily dazed. He truly looked like a good father. But did he forget that I'm also his daughter? Vivian didn't lash out as she usually did. She just stood there quietly, letting tears stream down her face. Ethan, I know you hate me. It's okay. I deserve this. Hearing this, Ethan didn't feel any happier. Instead, his frown deepened. When I was 18, I was willful and immature. And I hurt you. Later, to spite me, you got involved with my sister. Ethan, I know you hate me. So it's okay. She retreated slowly, tears falling like those of a heartbroken innocent. Ethan, I love you. The mistakes of the past are irreversible. And I'm willing to pay the price. With that, Vivian turned and left. Ethan instinctively wanted to chase her, but I held him tightly. Don't go. Ethan. Don't go. She's acting. She's deceiving you. I'm the one who met you at the orphanage. I'm Kara. Tears streamed down my face. But the system silenced me. I could only shake my head helplessly at him. He grew more anxious, losing his earlier composure. Ethan tried to shake me off but couldn't. In frustration, he pushed me to the ground. Kara, don't forget your place. He looked at me with disgust and chased after her without looking back. I ran after them, only to see Ethan catch up to Vivian in the traffic. The two embraced and kissed. I was completely numb. He truly loved Vivian. Then what was everything I had done? Watching them kiss passionately in the middle of the road, I began to feel that Ethan was no longer Ethan. He became blurry and chaotic, someone I didn't recognize. My Ethan had long since jumped from the 30th floor. His skull shattered, turning into ashes. My head throbbed with pain, and I was filled with anxiety and despair. Suddenly, a car sped toward the embracing couple. I sprinted over and pushed them aside. The next moment, I was thrown into the air and then heavily slammed to the ground. Blood spread beneath me, and even breathing was excruciatingly painful. Yet, I felt a strange sense of relief, letting myself sink into darkness. It's finally over. I heard someone calling me familiar voice. Struggling to open my eyes, I saw Ethan from our school days lying opposite me. His face blushed as he looked at me, smiling shyly. Kara, are you hungry? I bought you some Kara. Eat a little. The other students in the classroom were still reciting their lessons, but he quietly crouched beside me. I was dazed, letting him unwrap the Kara and feed it to me. The sweet, sticky taste spread, tinged with a bit of bitterness. Ethan, is that you? He looked at my teary eyes, a bit flustered. Yes, Heather, it's me. Did I make you too hungry? Sorry. I'll come earlier next time. He wanted to wipe my tears but was afraid of hurting me. I grabbed the collar of his school uniform and kissed him. Ethan, it's so good to see you again. Our classmates turned at the noise, immediately erupting into excited cheers. I kissed him for a while before letting go. Ethan's ears were flushed red, but his eyes shone brightly. Kara, wait for me. In 2 years, we'll be grown up. Then, we'll be together forever. The promises of youth were passionate and sincere, full of courage to overcome anything. My trembling hand caressed his face, trying to memorize every detail. But suddenly, a buzzing sound filled my ears. Machines, voices, chaos. Ethan's face grew more and more distant, until it completely disappeared. The patient has lost too much blood and is going into shock. Doctor. There's no heartbeat. Inject 3 more doses of epinephrine. I struggled to open my eyes and looked at the doctor. Doctor. I want to see Ethan. Soon, let out a low sigh. Ethan walked in, covered in blood. At the sight of him, I shut my eyes in despair. Doctor. I want to see Ethan. He came closer, his expression tense and helpless. He leaned down beside me. Kara. I'm here. Kara. You're going to be okay. But I didn't look at him. I want to see Ethan. 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 The Ethan who once shared Kara with me. The Ethan who climbed to the top just to see me again. The Ethan who left everything to me so I wouldn't suffer. The Ethan who blushed just because I kissed him. The Ethan who let out a low sigh. Loved me deeply. But this man wasn't him. He's not Ethan. And I will never see Ethan again. I lost the love of my life a long time ago. Then I heard the cold voice of the rebirth assistant. Host mission failed. Rebirth system shutting down. I sighed and let out my final breath. Ethan. Kara has come to find you. In a spring-filled forest path, a man in a tailored suit walked slowly forward. In his hand, he held a bouquet of daisies. He stopped in front of a tombstone and placed the flowers down. The couple on the tombstone smiled sweetly, their happiness practically radiating. Lucas lowered his head, lit a cigarette, and took a drag. Kara. Your father's been imprisoned. The Vivian family's assets are now in my hands. Your stepmother, who hired someone overseas to kill you by car accidents, he's under investigation. The police will have results soon. As for your sister, I sent her to the Philippines. Someone will take good care of her. Don't worry. He looked at the woman on the tombstone. His gaze soft. You left so suddenly. Without even a goodbye. Cardiac arrest. Was it despair? Was it grief? Lucas felt heartache not just for himself, but for all of them. If I'd known how deeply you two loved each other, I would have let go. But the timing was wrong. They were all puppets of fate. Sacrificed by time. In your next life. Be together. Be together. Truly. The end.